Hello, good morning. Lovely to see you all here. So my name is Alison Marshall, and I have the great honor of being the CEO of Age International, based in the UK. And this morning we're going to be talking about humanitarian with Cherian Matthews, Deputy CEO of Help Age International. And we're going to introduce ourselves, but just to say it's great to see you all. Thank you very much for coming here early on the last day of the conference. So I've only been in my role since August last year, so 10 months, but Cherian has been in his role much longer, and we're going to hear about his journey and all of the humanitarian situations that he's been involved with. Also to say that it was announced on Monday this week that Cherian is going to be the interim CEO of Help Age International.
Thank you.
So, Cherian, please introduce yourself, and then we'll hear a bit about your work on humanitarian issues.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and it's nice to be here. And I would like to thank IFA and also Jane for giving a space to talk about humanitarian and the crisis. Just briefly, I am born and brought up in rural India, and then I started my work with indigenous communities in eastern part of India. And I have been working with civil society agencies in India for a long time. And after that, I moved to an international development organization. I work with a couple of them. Then again, the humanitarian crisis really made me to move out of India. It is the tsunami. In 2005, I moved to Sri Lanka to head up the response leadership in Sri Lanka for tsunami. Even before that, while I was in India, I was engaged in super cyclone in Odisha and also various floods in India. And I was in the middle of a lot of humanitarian crisis and management. But tsunami really hit me in terms of really seeing the sheer scale and the impact that has made in Sri Lanka. And then I moved to Bangkok. In fact, I lived in Bangkok for 8 years and was the Asia Regional Director. And I had an opportunity to travel to many of the Asian countries. Again, humanitarian crisis, the Philippines super typhoon. I was managing that at that time, and the Nepal earthquake, and then Indonesia earthquake, as well as the Myanmar cyclone. So I have been through many humanitarian crises. And in 2010, I had an opportunity to lead up the humanitarian response in Ethiopia when we had a food crisis at that moment. So mine has been a story of looking at humanitarian work as well as the development work. And then in 2017, I moved to Help Age, and that's where it opened up my mind to look at all the people's rights in the context of humanitarian crisis.
Thank you. So Cherian mentioned a number of causes of humanitarian emergencies, and I would love to see from you in the room. So I'm going to ask a few questions, and I would like you to raise your hand if it applies to you. And once your hand is raised, if you can leave it up, that would be great. So who among you lives in a country or in a region that is affected by flooding? Okay, keep your hands up. Who lives in a country or region affected by drought? Who lives in a country affected or a region affected by typhoons or tsunamis? Keep them up if you can. What about a country or region affected by severe heat or severe cold? Okay. What about earthquakes? A country or region affected by earthquakes? What about a country or region to which others have fled because of an emergency situation. Yeah? And what about a country or region affected by conflict? Okay, so if you raised your hand for any of those questions, put it up and we can look around the room. That's pretty much everybody. We're pretty much all affected in some way or another by conflict, by disasters that are coming to do with the extremes of weather and climate change. Thank you. So back to Cherian. You mentioned all sorts of humanitarian moments that you've been involved with. Is there any particular one that stays with you where you had a turning point or you met somebody that really stays with you over the years?
I think again I go back to Sri Lanka, my experience working on the tsunami. And as you know, that the tsunami also opened up a bit of a peace in between, both the north and the south. So I had an opportunity to travel to the northern part of Sri Lanka. And I was sitting with an older woman who lost everything, and in a little tent. And I think it was gripping to hear her stories, and also really listening to the kind of struggle she's going through. I think and of course that woman was from a vulnerable group. One must understand that any crisis exacerbate the inequities, and that will amplify during the humanitarian crisis. That's an experience I thought, this is something that not only a double burden, and sometimes that inequity stays there as long as the crisis is there. So that real moment, a lot of thinking in terms of systemic thinking and structural issues related to the humanitarian came to my mind.
Right. So please help us to understand the sort of different nature of the emergencies which older people are currently facing. And what do you see as the key drivers of these emergencies and the impact of chronic humanitarian situations on older people?
A lot of questions there, Alison. So I just want to really paint a picture with some numbers so that you can realize the kind of enormity of the crisis. The Global Humanitarian Review, which is done by UN, has predicted that in 2023, 339 million people will require humanitarian assistance.
Wow.
Not only that, the UNHCR, the UN body of looking after refugees, they said that this is the largest displaced population ever we are witnessing right now. That is 112 million people. If you put 7 to 10% older population within that, just imagine the sheer number of older people who are impacted by the crisis. And when it comes to the whole older people, I think my experience is that the conflict is a crisis. The drought, the floods, which we talked about, the man-made disasters or climate-induced disasters is a crisis. And also the crisis of a war, in what is we are witnessing in Ukraine. But one of the deepest challenges what we are all confronting, those who are in the humanitarian sector, is the protracted nature of the crisis. In Yemen, for instance, how long it is going on, in Syria, in Myanmar, in Afghanistan, you look around, it's not just for 1 year or a 2 year. Yeah, of course, there are crises, the tsunami came and we had a rebuilding and it has settled, but there are a number of people continue to stay in that crisis mode for a long term and long period. That's something that very, very difficult for older people and especially the communities to take care.
Absolutely. So what are the key needs of older people in humanitarian situations? And maybe that's a bit different if it's a sudden onset, like a flood, compared to these protracted, year after year after year situations.
Yeah, yeah. So when you look at, when I talked about, I have a lot of experience in the humanitarian, but as I joined in HelpAge International, I think one of the things we realized, what should be the unique value we can add to any crisis? And one of the unique value I found is that how do you build voice, inclusion, and protection of older people in the midst of crisis? That is so important. Not looking at older people as victims, but they are survivors. They are agents of change. They can also rebuild, reconstruct. So they have a lot of wisdom to do that. Sometimes we only look at the vulnerability part of it, but it's so important to look at the contributory part of it. But when it comes to the needs as well, it varies, in different contexts. Definitely health and care comes one of the foremost challenge for older people, especially those who are affected by non-communicable diseases like diabetes. So the entire community system is cut out and they need some help. The another need is a psychosocial support, especially in the conflict area. We found that that's an important support that we need to provide. Then we felt that the most important part of the response is the cash and cash transfer. Why? Because it gives them dignity, and they would like to choose what they would like to have and how they would like to spend. The other area what we are looked at is that how do we really look at the assistive devices? When there is a crisis happens, there is a huge displacement happen, that's one of the need. At the same time, at the initial phase of the crisis, usually what we have a non-food items. But for older people, the non-food items is a different list. Even we'll have adult diapers, and there are different things we include in the non-formal living. So being sensitive to the needs of the older people in whatever we do is so important. Even to put a water stand, we need to be very sensitive. And you all know that among the older people, around 40 to 47%, especially in Ukraine, we have seen, are disabled person as well. So how do we be sensitive to that, and how do we make sure that they are protected? Lastly, the most important support that we need to provide is the home care support. The home care, the volunteers who can go and support the most elderly or most frail older people.
Thank you. Yes, your point about volunteers reminds me of a beautiful story from Ukraine, which again shows the contribution of older people. So I remember reading about a couple who spent 2 weeks in a bomb shelter in their home that was further to the east. And then they fled and managed to make their way to Lviv, where they were welcomed by some volunteers working with the partners there, with HelpAge. And the volunteers there helped them find shelter and to meet their basic needs for food and water. And they found their place. And they were so inspired by this warm welcome that they had had from the volunteers that they themselves then became volunteers. So as older people themselves, they are then welcoming and supporting other older people, helping them now to get doctor's appointments, for example, and get their medication and settle as much as is possible in a very difficult situation. So I love that story of older people supporting other older people.
Yeah.
And another thing, Cherian, that you mentioned is a very humanitarian way of speaking, non-food items. And that even they call them NFIs. Yeah. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to the rest of us. Yeah. So just give us a bit more of a list of what are NFIs and how is the list different for older people?
Yeah, it may include hygiene items,
soap, toothbrush,
that kind of
shampoo.
If it is a winter, it will also include blankets and winterization material.
Winterization. This is another. Warm clothes, fuel, and heating fuel.
Heating fuel and sort of thing. So it varies context to context. So I think one of the things which I just wanted to reiterate what you talked about, Alison, is that the power of older people being the agents of change is so vivid. So for example, in Ukraine, my experience has been we have around 800 social workers. They are paid, yeah, they are not volunteers. And almost 80% of them are older person. You know, we also need to look at the diversity within the older people as well. So not so old can also support the older people. So that's the same model we adopted in various places, including Venezuela, in now the Syria, Turkey earthquake crisis. So that model has been quite inspiring, as you say, when older people reaching out to another older people, that empathy, that kind of a connection takes place. And coming back to NFIs, as a disaster strikes, one of the major important part of the role of the local actors are that to really sit with the older people and trying to understand what should be the NFI package should look like. So it starts from there. So it should start from looking at their needs and trying to develop a NFI package and then scale it up. For them.
Yeah, I was very privileged to visit Pakistan in November last year to see the flood response work and to meet some of the older people. And one of the things that was very valued was a torch to see in the nighttime, and particularly for people who were living in a camp situation to find the way to the washrooms. That torch in the night, really, really important. And also a whistle to draw attention if there would be a dangerous situation. So as part of protection, that was another really important thing they valued.
Even mosquito net in some places. So it varies. Even we slowly develop another set of items, maybe hearing aid, specs, or assistive devices. So it continues as we move on into in providing that support.
So how do you see the nature of humanitarian situations evolving? And is the way that the humanitarian sector is responding, is it changing as climate change or the learning and the thinking of what works? How is it changing and evolving?
I think let me start with some positives. If you really look at some of the recent examples of crisis, now governments are much more prepared. So the recent cyclone experience in Myanmar and Bangladesh, for instance. So what happened when we respond, older people in crisis, that we also need to really understand that we need to support older people not when the crisis happened. We need to prepare them as well. So from preparedness onwards, the older people need to be involved, because you know that always the first responders are older people themselves and their families. They know where to go to the elevated place if it's a flood, and they have that kind of a geographical knowledge, and they are the first responders. So we have a lot of training programs to prepare them. So as part of that, we also prepared when we saw that the cyclone is moving to Myanmar and Bangladesh. We work with the local actors, our network members and partners, to really make sure that there is a protection. But thankfully, the government also played a role, same as in Gujarat, in western part, and in Pakistan also. So what I'm trying to say is that governments are much more prepared now, especially for some of the cyclone and that kind of a bit of a predictable disaster. So that's one thing. But the difficult problem is that one of the statistics which I haven't mentioned is that the 339 million people who need assistance are in 68 countries. So you can imagine the amount of needs. So it's so difficult to get funding for humanitarian crisis now. It's all skewed, and always there is a need but not enough resources. So that's a big challenge, one we is tackling. The another challenge is the protracted nature of the crisis. When it will end, nobody knows. So it's a kind of unending way of providing that support, and really that's a very difficult process one can have. So these are some of the challenges I see as a humanitarian. And also, one of the things which if I may share, is that we have already realized that we can't look at things in a humanitarian crisis mode. We need to move from humanitarian crisis to a development mode. For example, I think I can give some examples so that you really understand. So in Ukraine, I'm just giving an example. In Ukraine, we started off with home care, support, and kind of stuff. But we are very keen that the crises or humanitarian crisis can be a disruptors in the whole system, So how do we use those disruptors to really strengthen the whole of health system in Ukraine so that they are resilient to next shocks and disasters? Similarly, if there is a social protection or a program, how do we move from our emergency cash transfer to a social protection or a social pension program, which is much more long-lasting? So how do we move from humanitarian to development? That we need to think from the day one. Yeah. Otherwise, we can get trapped into that assistance mode, not thinking about empowering people and moving to the next stage.
That's so interesting. So this sense of the emergency moment, and then there's a spectrum through to the longer term development, and how does it evolve from one through to the other?
Yes.
And just thinking about social pensions, so cash transfers at the moment of the disaster, but then how does that connect? And I know many older people in Ukraine, they're only surviving on their state pension, but it's not enough. So how does that then transfer into a push for a higher amount for that pension over the longer term? Yeah. Interesting. Okay, I would love to take any comments or questions from the floor, and then we can have a bit more conversation. But yes, let's have a roving mic and take some inputs and questions. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Kathleen Brasher, and thank you. That was just a really fascinating conversation. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how you tell the story of both the strength and the vulnerability of older people in disasters. It's a really complex time. I live in a bushfire area and a flood area and a drought area, and encouraging older people to they are the first responders because they're in the rural communities. So they do the emergency response. They get very tired very quickly and then are pushed away because they're seen as vulnerable. And yet they've got so much, they know the geography, they know the land. So can you just speak a little bit more about telling that story of both at the same time?
So one is, okay, at the macro level, I would really encourage all of you to really look at how do you project the narrative when a crisis happens. So, for example, when I talked about HelpAge International, earlier, around 4 to 5 years back, the kind of a communication materials that we used is quite a lot of showing them as a vulnerable groups, someone who needs. Even some of the documentaries produced were looking like that. Okay, they need that support. But if you really look at some of the documentaries coming up now, is much more powerful. How they have come together, how they have saved a particular family, and how they helped each other. So I think how do we create that narrative in the media? I think we are very conscious that whatever we communicate, and that's something that we are also talking to our network members and partners to really encourage them to use the positive images, this kind of a survival and resistance or resilience of older people. So that's number one. Number two, whenever we do a gathering, so one of the things what I just want to share with you is that whenever a disaster happens, the first thing what we do, what we call a rapid need assessment. The rapid need assessment will really help us to find out, and this assessment is done by consulting all the older people, around 600 to 800 older people. And that will really tell us the story about what are the needs and kind of a thing. So from that time onwards, that consultation and the evidence gathering time onwards, we bring the older people to the fore. Okay, now this is the assessment, what we can do in terms of distribution, home care. So we are slowly bringing them to their leadership capabilities, capacities. And our constant engagement is to the local government officials, and we interact with them to really tell them about that narrative, about the strength, how do we use the strength in terms of preparedness, in terms of the response. So it's a kind of a slow process, but I think what I'm trying to say, either micro level as well as the macro level, we need to try hard to change the narrative in a very positive way.
Absolutely. And from our point of view, the way we use images is also very important. So some of the pictures that we've had here hopefully show older people in their dignity, and also making sure that we put quotes. So what did the older person say, and putting that at the top of a press release or putting that on the website, so it's their voice and the dignity, and trying to, put forward what they are doing, not just the need. But yeah, it's a balance, obviously. So I also saw a hand from Adrian.
So several months ago, I had the privilege of interviewing folks from HelpAge who were on the ground in the Ukraine for Generation Boulder, one of our podcasts. And they brought home to me how many of the older adults were taking care of children.
Yes.
And then they explained again that this was all over the world, not particularly. So how do you both, with Age International and HelpAge International, help the children? Because if the older adults are their caregivers, they've got that issue in their life as well. And it's probably one of the most prominent issues they have in their life.
Yeah. So I think that's a very good question. I think when we respond to any situation, we always say that older people and their families and their carers. So the assistance not only go to the older people, but it also goes to the carers and also their family members. And family members, as you said, maybe some of their grandchildren they are looking after. Let me also draw back to some stories from the Horn of Africa. Again, Horn of Africa is a crisis. Around 43 million people need assistance. So if you really look at that kind of a rural context, I think in this seminar we talked about feminization of aging, but there is an aging of the agriculture sector as well. You know, because of the climate change and the drought, most of the young people migrate to the cities, and who are left in the rural area, it's all older adults and sometimes their grandchildren. And they want to hold on to their assets, whatever they have, whether it's livelihood or any animals that they have. So they quite often, when we do the cash transfer, it is so heart-touching, you know. We also do a post-distribution monitoring. When you do the cash transfer, medicine, food comes, but the next is their contribution to the children, either children education or buying milk for the children. You know what I mean? So we can really see that how they care for the children. And it is so heart-touching. You know, I don't want to tell a lot of emotional stories, but let me tell this. When we did a study, and in the rural context, the older women are the one who eat the last. Yeah? They often skip the meal and they go begging. Such a condition they are in the streets. And there are many agencies look at the nutrition level of children, but we argue, what about the nutrition level of the older adults who are in crisis? Yeah. So we are currently commissioning a research to really look at the nutrition status of older adults in crisis. So it was a long answer, but you can understand it's very systemic, very complex.
Yeah. Please may I bring in Bartlett, who has experience of the emergency currently in East Africa, working in Kenya, but also experience in Ukraine as well.
No, thanks, Alison. Thanks, Cherian. For me, one of the struggles I've been having is that when a situation happens like Ukraine, we have the protracted crisis being forgotten. So all the attention goes to whatever is happening now in Ukraine. But one of the things that we forget is that it's a whole society approach. We have a group of young people in the Horn of Africa who really, whatever it takes, they want to come to Europe. It doesn't matter. Whatever it takes, they want to come to Europe. Some are being recruited, let's say, with the Al-Shabaab. Then within the East Africa part of it, there's displaced communities, there is still war that is ongoing, and then the role of older people is still forgotten. These are mediators, these are counselors, these are people with the knowledge that we need as young people. So this is the challenge I've been facing within humanitarian, and a lot of things Cherian has mentioned that I do not want to repeat, and I take it as a whole society. In as much we look into Ukraine, let us please look also in the other side, where it's actually protracted and forgotten. So that is my experience. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe just pass the mic there to Kizito, who might have a word about the cyclone Idai experience in Mozambique. Again, tell us, Kizito, about the support and the work of older people in that crisis.
Thank you, Alison and Cherian. So I am Kizito Chiwala, and I'm the country director of HelpAge International in Mozambique, based in Maputo. Cyclone Idai happened in 2019, March of 2019, killing at least 1,500 people across Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi, and with a loss in terms of economy of about 3 billion. I want to speak to the inclusion and exclusion of older people during emergency responses, with a particular example of our response in Cyclone Idai. Soon after the earthquake, the cyclone, we carried out a rapid needs assessment for older people, or RNOP, and of the about 1,000 older people interviewed, about 66% actually mentioned that they felt that they were excluded from the services being provided by the responders. And exclusion here did not only mean that they did not make it to the beneficiary lists, no, but they were talking in terms of the type of services that were being provided were not specific to older people. One example was, for instance, there was an organization that was distributing food items. They were distributing biscuits, and those biscuits were very hard to chew. And most of the older people did not have teeth. So it was difficult for them to be able to eat the biscuits. The other one was also the latrines, the pit latrines that were constructed. Most of them were constructed far away and usually in the dark during the night, which would cause fear, and insecurity, especially for older women. So I think as we as we construct our humanitarian responses, I think it's always important to remember how we can tailor, our responses in such a way that they fully respond to the specific needs of older people. Thank you very much.
Can I add on to the question, please? I'm Rekha Modi from India. What I want to highlight, yes, I've been here for the last 3 days listening to problems. But yes, there are pockets in this world where good things are happening. And if we document them, it can be a great source of inspiration. I give you a very small example. In India, you've heard of Kashmir, I'm sure all of you. I've been working there and I realize that they don't need old age homes because their culture is such that it protects the old people. So my request to both your organization is, please document best practices in this world for aging. That will be a source of inspiration. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to fly to the other side of the world and hear a comment from the Latin America side. Please, can we have a microphone to the lady with the black and white dress there? Thank you.
And she's also.
And then we'll come back to... Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I am Soraya Montoya. I come from Colombia, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. I was it's very interesting the thing that you are talking about humanitarian help for the old people. I will tell 2 cases in Colombia. We have more than 1.5 older people that they are displacement for the armed conflict that we have had for more than 50 years. And it has been the toughest population that suffer the conflict because they lose everything. They lose part of their family, they lose the land, the houses, and they have an emotional and physical losses too, and the family structure was broken. And for the old people, it's tougher than for the other, because that the family structure, they get separate, they don't have the culture to talk with the kids, grandkids, and they have the intergenerational relationship has been broken. They get separate, and now they are going back. The young people, they don't want to go back to the rural area, and that is a big problem. And it's growing. Even that we sign a peace process, there are still growing a lot of displacement, and the old people are suffering that part. And the second thing is the migration. We have a big problem with migration. In the East, we are South America, we have Caribbean Sea, we have Pacific Sea, we are close, we are neighbor of Panama. In the East part, we have the migration from Venezuela. And the old people, nobody see that the old people are migrant too. And UNICEF has helped them a lot, and they ask for help. They have a point that the name is the water point, where the people can go get a shower, clean waters, and they are helping. You know, there is a lot of old people that are coming here, and nobody's taking care of them. They are taking care of the women, of course, the pregnant woman, the kids, very good, but the old people, they don't count in that. And for the part of the west part that we are going, that is the part that the migrants are going to US. And in that part, we have migrants from Africa, Asia, South America. They want to go to the United States. And it's so tough because the old people, the traffic people, they charge more to the old people, but they are the last one to get in the boats or in the selva, I don't know, in the forest to take them, and that is so unfair. That is that 2 point about Latin America, that you haven't heard anything about Latin America these days.
Thank you so much, Soraya. So, Samantha.
Good morning, everyone. I am Samantha Lieno Aduge from HelpAge Sri Lanka. Thank you, Cherian. Thank you, Alison. I would like to draw your attention on another matter, which I think Cherian just mentioned, that is the poor eyesight of elders. I mean, there is a big problem among the elders that 70 to 80% of the elders are finding it difficult to even take care of their ADL because of their poor eyesight. And also it is also known that most of these Asian countries, not even Asian countries, other countries, they even take care of their grandchildren. So with this poor vision, they are finding it really difficult to manage their day-to-day activities and to even look after themselves. So I would like to request everyone who are wearing your spectacle, please remove your spectacle and try to do your work. It's impossible, okay? So this is a big problem, and do you think that we are paying enough attention on this issue. HelpAge Sri Lanka is the only HelpAge organization runs our own eye hospital, and also in Sri Lanka and I know most of the countries, even the cataract is the biggest problem among the elders, who 70% of the blindness is because of cataract.
Yes.
So are we addressing this issue enough? I'm sorry to say that I attended a side event yesterday which discussed about this vision and vision issues, but very poor attendance on that event. So it's amazing because
Thank you.
most of these elders are really suffering with their poor vision.
Yeah.
And one small example I can tell you, now in Sri Lanka we use a lot of spices, and the spices bottle and the coffee bottle is one next to the other. The elderly person who try to cook her meal, sometimes by mistake put the coffee into the meal, and then finally it will become a family issue.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
thank
can
you very
imagine.
much.
Thank you, Samantha. Yes, imagine the Turkey-Syria earthquake. In the middle of the night, you're up in your apartment block, it's shaking, the whole thing is falling down. You get out of bed, you can't find your spectacles, you're trying to get out of the building, you can't see, everybody's rushing, pushing, you lose your family, you can't find your way to any support because you can't see where you're going. Anyway, it's dark. I mean, just imagine yourself in that situation without any spectacles, without your vision. So difficult, and that's why it's so important that assistive devices are hearing, visual aids, mobility aids are part of the work in a humanitarian situation. Okay, I'm seeing more people who want to comment. Yes, please.
I'm Professor Pratibha Mishra from the India, Chhattisgarh, central part of India. I have a different opinion in terms of that we have to define or redefine the word society. And in spite of like rural areas, rural homes or rural villages, they are developing in terms of old age homes. Can we have this kind of strategy with the help of university, with the help of government officials and the non-governmental organizations, that instead of developing various old age homes, can we provide the support or regular support, not one-time support, two-time support, or frequently support, regularly support those who are completing the age of 60, and especially women, because they have a lot of social pressures. They do not come out from the homes. This I'm speaking on the basis of my experience and what I have learned from the different homes. And various homes, they are only homes, but not, they are providing the services in terms of family atmosphere, love and affection atmosphere. They are just kind of what do you call, jail or something, that lot of older people are coming together and staying together there, whether it is a health needs or social needs or the other needs, they are not fulfilled. So it's my suggestion is that can we have that kind of model which do not promote the old age homes, but the services providing in terms of homes, not when the people contact them, but regularly those who have attended the age of 60 and above. This is my submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, important. It's an important discussion going on with Ukraine at the moment, to bring it back there, that we need to continue the deinstitutionalization that was already in train, and talking to the government about that is one of the things that we're doing. Now I wanted to bring in an opportunity of an example for responding from the Philippines. Can you raise your hand for the microphone?
No, I am not from Philippines.
No,
So can I?
sorry, this gentleman here, and then we'll come back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, the organization I'm with works more on the development side, but I'm struck by the similarities. And I've been impressed all week with the work that HelpAge International is doing on the implementation side with the intergenerational self-help clubs. And then Cherian this morning mentioned the transitioning in humanitarian situations to cash transfers. Both of those, I think, for me, are examples of making our approaches more flexible so that we're operating at different levels simultaneously, not just focused on what will serve today, but what can we do to have a diversity, a flexible intervention today that can meet the different needs, whether it's older adults, LGBT, people with disabilities and special needs. And then for the long term, how can the leave behind add more? And the session yesterday with Maori older adult housing is a great specific example to me. Their help guide, it was clear at a granular level. Each question was not just about housing. They were playing a bigger game than housing. The questions would also serve to develop the skills and relationships and experience that could be applied later to other social situations and to self-realization, self-development. So I see these kinds of things cross-cutting through the humanitarian and development sector in terms of flexibility and playing at different levels.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, this idea of after a humanitarian or emergency situation that we want to build back better and use it as a disruptor so that things can be different answer, or this sense of the spectrum. Absolutely.
Hi, I am Sarita from Nepal, and so pleased to listen you. And we have been also working on humanitarian aids when it comes about the humanitarian aids. So within the elders, so there are marginalized and there are the intersectionalities. So my experience working on these areas, especially we work for the right and dignity of lesbian, bisexual and trans person in Nepal. So when the earthquake happened in 2015, the massive earthquake, so after that we saw government has different plans and programs for the for the affected families and the people. And what we observed during that time was they are distributing the relief materials to the people. And my concern and our concern was since most of the many from our community members, they don't have citizenship because there are so many challenges to get that citizenship with their own identity. My concern during that time, and again in the pandemic recently, that government has distributed so many relief materials. So when it comes about taking the relief from the government, so they need to show their identity card, whether they are the person or not. And we feel so sad because our community members, especially the elders, recently 72 years old a transgender woman took her citizenship card, so this is one of the realities that we are facing. And my concern is, do you also face, or is there any, things that is happening about the, marginalized, within the, elders? We have some class, caste, diversities, geographic areas, sexual orientation, gender identity, and these people are suffering a lot because there is not any support system. Since our elders are disowned by their own family, and we do have some shelter home, but that is not accessible for the LGBTI elders. So this is how we are facing, and our communities are asking, we need a shelter home because there is no one to support us. At the young age, we leave our home because of our identity.
Yes.
So yeah, I just want to share these things. And do you have any things related on this matter?
Thank you. So we'll come to Cherian, and this point about your identity cards, very, very important. And often in an emergency situation, people are losing their precious documents, and then it becomes even more difficult. If you have lost your birth certificate, lost your identity card, how can you prove who you are and where you're from? And so, Cherian, we're going to come to you for a response on this if you would like, and also some wrapping up final comments or responses to the room.
Yeah. So I think, thank you for raising that issue. I think that's also a reality. We work in a society which is unequal, and from my humanitarian experience, that often happens. Then the marginalized are further marginalized in the interest of humanitarian But I think one of the core principles of humanitarian is that how do we look at all human beings with equal respect and trying to reach out to the most marginalized. That's kind of a principle in which we are working, and fundamentally principles of impartiality and looking at the equality and all. And again, losing the identity documents is a major problem in any disaster. So it is so important to really organize liaison places where the older people or the people can come and seek that assistance. And these are the things our volunteers and our staff keep raising with the government and other bodies to make sure that they are recognized and they are getting the right benefit that they should get. So it's a kind of a constant struggle, and then we need to improve that. And absolutely, when you talk about the LGBT, this is something that we need to really look at and really look at the vulnerability analysis. We often do a vulnerability analysis. Within that, we see who are the most marginalized, and we need to get the humanitarian and assistance to them first.
Absolutely. So any final wrap-up comments on this conversation as we draw to a close?
I just want to share that, each one of you experience humanitarian crisis in your life course, and also will continue to do so because of the climate change and other issues. There are three things which I just want you to remember when it comes to the humanitarian. I may be repeating what I have already said. One is, how do we look at older people not as a victim but as a survivor and agent of change, and creating that narrative and creating the support. And also really, the second thing which I would like to say, that even though you are not from a country where the humanitarian crisis is happening, but we also are talking to other developed nations to really make sure that the older people are considered when they provide the humanitarian assistance. So we need a continuous advocacy to the wider donor community to make sure that there are consistent messages. The third one, which we quite often we argue, that we need to have enough data. Yeah, sex age disaggregated data is lacking in all the crises. So our RNAs are sex age disaggregated data. That's kind of a model, but we really insist the humanitarian architecture to really make sure that there is a data collection so that we have enough evidence on what is going on. And one of the major things, in order to ensure voice, inclusion, and protection of the older people, one of the major things we do, along with our network member, to transform the humanitarian architecture in a way that they consider older people as one of the key change agents, and their voices are heard. That's what I just wanted to.
Absolutely. That's a great place to end, making sure that the voices of older people are heard, and that's something that we're working on through the Disasters Emergency Committee in the UK, working with the Red Cross, with Oxfam, Tear Fund, World Vision, Islamic Relief, many of those other large humanitarian agencies. Okay, so thank you very much for your contributions, for your questions, for all the experience you've brought to the conversation this morning. And thank you to all of you who are working to support older people in difficult and humanitarian and emergency situations. It's been a great pleasure to have the conversation, and thank you very much to Cherian.
Thank you.
And what a wonderful way to start day 4 of this important conference. So thank you very much, Alison Marshall, and also Cherry and Matthew. If you can just stay there and pause, it's my great pleasure to start to bring to a close this important conference. Now, we're doing it now because you're going to go off to all of the sessions, and then you're going to grab your box lunch and probably enjoy the sun and the rest of the time in Bangkok. So it's important to thank each and every one of you. We had about 420 delegates from 56 countries, and we feel very proud. We feel proud to come together. The space that you created was one of nothing but warmth, compassion, commitment, dedication. We reached across to people people from all kinds of backgrounds and regions. Touch was central to this conference. And I thank you for allowing me to be part of this environment, because it gives me hope that we actually are working towards going forward together. We come from different backgrounds and we tackle different areas and different issues, but we're all going in the same direction because we believe in what we're doing, and that's improving the quality of life of older people around the world. And every step that we take is a step closer to the end game. I'd like to invite all of the directors of the International Federation up onto the stage. I can see you, so you need to get up here. And this is without warning, so none of them are in their pyjamas, so that's a good thing. And of course, you know, other directors have been here and have to left. I'd also please ask the representatives for IFA at the United Nations to come up on stage. And we're missing two, but thank you. I'd also like to ask the staff of the IFA, and they're lost also. Okay. You know, while I'm asking my staff to come up, I'm also acknowledging that we have a small and mighty team. You know, we are a small team, and some of my staff have been almost working 24/7. So I'm very proud to be part of the team. We come from entirely different backgrounds, don't we? And we connect in different ways. Some of you I haven't met, haven't seen for 10 years, but it's like we were just neighbours yesterday. And as I see different people in the audience, I want to acknowledge Kimberly Littlemore. Kimberly, we met way back, but you've not only brought yourself here, you've brought the stories of your experiences. And that's what IFA conferences are about. So thank you very much. I also want to thank our colleagues from New Zealand. Can you stand up? And the rest of the team, Diane, is enjoying breakfast or Bangkok. But, you know, the team from New Zealand have actually raised money to get here. You know, so this is the commitment. So please, once again, give each other a warm welcome to the next stage of your journey. You know, as I leave the stage for the final time, I am thrilled, I'm happy, I'm relaxed. I don't need to be relieved because I'm part of the community and I go forward, but just in a different place and time. So it's the right thing for me to step down as Secretary General, and I feel really positive about that and the contribution that I'm going to make in the future. My final comment, and then I'll give it to you, is that for those that don't know, my interview way back in 2002 was -27 in Montreal, Quebec. And it's the first time that my new husband, Greg Shaw, had seen snow. And we decided that it would be a couple of years' commitment. Greg volunteered for a number of years because there wasn't enough money in the bank to pay Greg, and there wasn't quite enough money to pay me. So we've come a long way, not only in terms of our budget, but in terms of how we operate as IFA, who we are, and who we want to be in the future. So my last comment goes to the Director of International and Corporate Relations. Is that what your title is? And it goes to, I'm very proud to say my husband. So could you please join with me in thanking Greg? So I will step back. Thank you for the experience and the life with you, and I look forward to my next exploration adventure in this field. So, Grace?
Oh, don't go. Well, this is a very special occasion, particularly when you all see that Jane just now mentioned a lot of people, but she always stepped behind us. And I am the one, on behalf of the IFA board, to come to the stage. And I would like to let every one of you know that our board is so proud of Jane to bring us to a very promising, as you mentioned the word hope. I think when we come here, we really have some hope, and I think our hope is getting bigger and bigger, because after all these days, we share our knowledge, share our practice, share our ideas, share what we are thinking in our mind, rather than just put it in our mind, but we put it up, not just only words, but we are going to make it happen in our actions. So today, I would like you to join me to give a big clap and give a great blessing to our Jane. She is not just belong to IFA, she belong to ours. Well, we know her well. In her mind, she not just working for IFA, she working for all of us. Particularly, I know her for so many years, 20? Yeah, 20. Almost 20 years. And she actually lift up a lot of people's hearts to believe that we can do more for our field, we can do more for our elderly people in the world, not just only in one region. That's why we love her so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I forgot one vital announcement, and I apologise. The vital announcement is, in 2025, see us in South Africa.
So, colleagues, friends, yes, on behalf of my fellow Africans, and there are quite a few of them, West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, I would love to welcome you to Cape Town in 2025. The founding father of our nation said, poverty is not an accident. Like slavery and apartheid, it is man-made and can be removed by action. So come and welcome. You're most welcome, and come and join us. Thank you, Jane.